Hello, hello. How's everybody doing today? So today is Friday, November 20th, and this is your stimulus update and Q&A. So once you join, say you're here so that I know who can see me. Right now, we are broadcasting live. We are on my YouTube channel, Jamie Trull. Make sure you're subscribing if you're watching me on YouTube. We are also broadcasting this live into my Facebook community, Financial Literacy for Women Business Owners. If you're not over there, you need to come join us, jamietrull.com/group, and also on my Facebook business page. So wherever you are watching me from, hello, hello. So today we're going to go over a quick update on what is going on with the stimulus package negotiations, and then I'm going to take any questions that you have. There have been a couple of updates on PPP, specifically around the tax consequences of PPP. So I'm going to go over that as well. So as of right now, not a whole lot has changed with regards to the stimulus package negotiations that are going on in Congress. They are still ongoing. There is no deal as of right now. There was some talk about potentially putting the stimulus package negotiations along with the budget that they have to agree on within the next 3 weeks or so. And they have decided, it sounds like today, that they're not going to be doing that. So that could have potentially put at risk a government shutdown if they could not come to an agreement. So they have separated those two negotiations. So they're going to be doing the budgeting separately from the stimulus negotiations. And we all know how that has gone thus far. So as of right now, it's still kind of the same situation with Republicans wanting to spend less on a more targeted bill and Democrats wanting to spend more on a broader stimulus bill. So a couple of things I thought that were interesting just to kind of give you, I was looking up a few things right before this meeting, and there have been some new reports, and I thought these were just interesting numbers to really show how this pandemic is continuing to really have a widespread impact on business. So as of just the month of October, 1 million new Americans fell below the poverty line, which is really scary. It's been 7 million since May have fallen below the poverty line that were not previously below that line. So this is having widespread impact, and unemployment numbers are still at highs, and it's really, really still impacting a lot of people out there. So if you are one of those people who's been heavily impacted by all of this, know that I'm thinking about you. Know that hopefully I will continue to be bringing you all of the information that I can as there are new avenues, new things that you can do to get help for yourself, because I really I want to show up for you guys and make sure you're aware of any of those programs that could help you in the situation that you're in, especially if you are a business owner. That's what I focus on. So I'm really here to try to help you, keep your business running, to keep your family fed, and to make sure that you can kind of weather the storm. There are a few potentials for money. So just as an FYI, with the PPP program, we had about, I think it was, they have about 138 billion-ish left that was not spent. So not all the PPP loans were given out before they kind of closed the loans. So you could not get, I think August, sometime in August is when they kind of shut down for being able to get a PPP loan. You cannot get one right now, but if they were to open that portal again, they've got at least, even just in funding that has already been done, another $138 billion sitting there. They could either repurpose to another PPP loan, maybe do as a stimulus check. There is some money that is left there. The Federal Reserve also has close to $500 billion of unspent money that they were apportioned. So right now there is some discussion around, well, can we take some of the money that has been apportioned there and hasn't been spent and spend it elsewhere? So there are some avenues to hopefully be able to get people help. But what we really need to focus in on is getting that next stimulus package passed. You guys are seeing it just like I am, where this thing, it's going to be a dark winter. We're seeing it around here. Cases are picking up. And so it's likely that even without government shutdowns and things like that, that this is going to negatively impact businesses. So that's kind of the update of where the stimulus negotiations are, but keep checking back. I'm here every Friday at 1:30 p.m. taking your questions and giving you updates. The other thing I wanted to update you guys on is PPP loan taxability. So there have been kind of some questions as to how this is going to really work in practice. And we've been waiting on further guidance from the IRS. So I have an entire video on it over on my YouTube channel. I have linked that link to the playlist about PPP up above. There are several different videos. So there are different tutorials on the different forgiveness applications out there. But there is also a tutorial on taxability, because I get that question a lot. What's the tax implications of getting the PPP? So importantly, the PPP loan, based on the way it was written in the CARES Act, the money that came in, the income to you once it's forgiven, right? If you get your PPP loan forgiven, that is not considered income. Okay. So if you don't get it forgiven, it's sitting on your balance sheet as a liability. So it's not income then. If you do get it forgiven, it's not considered taxable income. All right. It's non-taxable income to you as the business owner. So that's how it was written in the CARES Act. However, the thing that the IRS later came out with in about May or so, the IRS came out and said, well, that's fine. Your income is not going to be taxable, but any expenses that you pay with that PPP loan. So if you got a $10,000 PPP loan and you used it all on payroll for $10,000, those expenses are no longer deductible for you. Okay. So if you normally would have deducted those payroll expenses, if that would have been an expense to you on your P&L, which is true if you are, sorry, my son just walked in and threw me off a little bit. So that is true. If you're not a sole proprietor, you do deduct payroll on your P&L, okay? You can't deduct that anymore, meaning those aren't going to be tax deductions. So your tax bill may be a little bit higher because you can't deduct those things. So that's what the IRS came out and said. Some of Congress was kind of upset about that. They really did not agree with that, because the entire purpose, they said, of the PPP was to not have any tax implications. But thus far, nothing has been passed that would overturn kind of what the IRS has said. So now the IRS has come out with more details, because here was the real confusion, right? When you think about it, if you are getting your loan forgiven, and there was some question around, well, does it matter if I get my loan forgiven in 2020 and 2021? And some people thought there might be tax implications to what year you get it forgiven. That's not the case. So according to the IRS, the way it's going to work is that if you file your taxes for 2020, so let's say it's April of next year, let's say March, because hopefully you're filing before April. Let's say it's March of next year, and you have not been able to get your loan forgiven yet, but you expect that it's going to be, if you have reasonable expectation that's going to be forgiven, right? You've done what you're supposed to do with it, and you have reasonable expectation that it's going to be forgiven, then you are not allowed to deduct those expenses on your tax return. So you can't just kind of play this game where if you haven't gotten it forgiven before you file your taxes, that somehow you get to deduct them. You have to think about the fact of, is this going to be forgiven or not? And then if later on, if you think it isn't going to be forgiven and you do deduct those expenses on your 2020 tax return, well, what's probably going to happen is that once that loan is forgiven, if it finally is, you'd have to go back and amend your 2020 tax return. So there's not really a game. I think some accountants thought maybe there would be a game of like, okay, well, is it going to affect 2020 or 2021? It will affect 2020 because you paid the expenses with PPP in 2020. So that's the year that it will impact your taxes potentially if you, regardless of when you get it forgiven. Okay, so I foresee that this may lead to some extensions in your tax returns. So more people might want to extend from April to October just so that they can get that loan forgiveness taken like care of before they have to file their taxes. It just makes it easier, and you don't have to do any guessing or wondering if you're going to get it forgiven. You will know by then. And if portion is only forgiven, then you will only lose that portion of a deduction, right? So if you get $7,000 of a $10,000 PPP loan forgiven, then $7,000 of those expenses you paid with it are not cannot be deducted. So I hope that makes sense. Make sure you're working with a good tax preparer for 2020, you guys, especially if you got a PPP loan, because there are just a lot of things that you're going to want to work with somebody qualified on. So I do have a list of preferred vendors. We had a new one that was put out this week. So if you haven't seen it, I forgot to link it, but go to jamietrell.com/preferred-vendors. And we have several different CPAs on there. If you're looking for somebody who is a tax preparer that can help you and is knowledgeable in this, then you can go to that list and find somebody. So that's really sort of what changed with that. Now, The big question, can that still change? Yes. So that may still change in another stimulus bill. What would change? Well, it's possible that they would come out and say, actually, you can still deduct those expenses. So you kind of get a double benefit. You get the income, but you don't have to pay any taxes, but you get to deduct the expenses as well. So there's no tax implication at all. And it's like that would make it even better than getting income from a client or something like that. You would actually have a better situation with that because you'd still be able to deduct it, but you don't have to qualify it as income. So that's kind of a win-win. It could still happen. So again, we're going to be watching that next stimulus package to see if something to that effect is in there. So again, if that's still kind of up in the air, now hopefully we will know more when we get into tax season, but that's only a couple of months away. So if we don't know anymore, it might be one of those years where it might not hurt to go ahead and extend your tax return anyway, just so that if anything does changes, you can take advantage of that. Okay. So those are really the updates that I had. If you are a sole proprietor, you can check out again at the playlist that's linked above for PPP. I do have one that's just for self-employed people. So the deductibility is a little bit different if you have no employees at all. You probably, unless you are a corp, unless you're an S corp or C corp, if you are just a sole proprietor or LLC with no S corp election, okay, you don't deduct your own pay anyway. So that's the nice thing is you don't really lose anything because you wouldn't have deducted your pay to yourself anyway. So any amount of that PPP loan that's being forgiven as owner pay to you as a sole proprietor, LLC, it's not going to affect you because that wasn't a deduction that you had to take anyway. I have a video that goes into that in a little bit more detail and talks about PPP specifically for self-employed people. If that's you, I would go check that out. Okay. I would love if you guys would ask me any questions that you have. Do you have anything that you've got that you've been thinking about? If you're wondering about PPP forgiveness, one of the questions that I continue to get is around when to apply. So number one, you have to wait till your bank is taking applications. Some are still waiting out that second stimulus package because that second stimulus package would likely have further simplification in the documents that you would need to supply for smaller loans and potentially even make the forgiveness process easier. So they've done a couple of things already. They've come out with that new form for PPP loans that are $50,000 and under. Again, I've got a video on that one as well. It's called the 3508S. So if you have a smaller loan, they have simplified it, but they may even simplify it further. So the decision on whether or not you want to apply for forgiveness is really up to you. For some people, I know they just want to get it over with and get it done. So if your bank is taking applications and you don't mind having to give a bunch of documentation for it, then you might as well go ahead and apply. If you, however, don't want to have to pull all that documentation together, or you're not sure if it's going to be fully forgiven. So for example, if you were overfunded, which some people were, a lot of sole proprietors got overfunded because they based what they got off of their gross before expenses instead of the net after expenses. I have seen some people that were overfunded that are not getting forgiven for their full amount because of it. So if you were overfunded, you might just want to hold out. Or if you were a new business, let's say, that got your loan based on January and February numbers, right? Because of the fact that your forgiveness is based off of 2019, you can only pay yourself based off of your 2019 numbers, the way it's written. You might want to hold out and see if more of a blanket forgiveness is passed. If you know you're going to get your whole thing forgiven, then you might as well go ahead and apply. Okay. So that's really some of the updates. So let me know I'm not seeing anybody on Facebook. I don't know if the Facebook questions just aren't coming through, but I'm seeing only YouTube ones coming through. Yeah. And we will see the stimulus if we see it. I mean, I think we're going to see something. The question is just how there's so much gridlock right now between the parties that it is very, it is very contentious at the moment. Yes. So I just think I think it's good if you aren't certain if you're going to get forgiven for your full loan. Waiting, I think, is the thing to do. The other thing that could potentially impact it is if you got an EIDL advance. So if you got that grant advance, right, that comes with that came for the EIDL, the $1,000 per employee. right now must be subtracted off of your PPP forgiveness. So when you apply for forgiveness, let's say you have that $10,000 loan, you spent it all correctly. Oh, see, I got you right before you even asked me, Paula, and I'm glad I can see you on Facebook. Awesome. Yeah, so there is a chance. So that is a very good question. The EIDL advance right now has to be subtracted from your PPP forgiveness. So if you have a $10,000 loan, you spent it all correctly, you would be forgiven for $10,000 in PPP. But then they subtract off, let's say you had a $1,000 EIDL advance. So what happens is that EIDL advance becomes a PPP loan of sorts, basically. So it's no longer, it's not an EIDL loan, but it becomes a PPP loan, which is payable over 2 or 5 years, depending on what your loan paperwork says and when you got the loan, at 1% interest. So it becomes a low interest loan, but you do have to pay it back. Now, they may, in the last version of what the Democrats wrote, they had taken that out and said that that was a mistake and that they're not going to have that adjustment. But that has not passed, and it won't pass in its current form. So we don't know if they will change that. We also don't know if that does change, what happens for people that already had their loan forgiven and had their EIDL advance already removed from it. We don't know. Does that mean that they would forgive those loans, or is it only going to be for people that apply for forgiveness after the that is passed? So we don't know. So if that's something that's really important to you, then you could also put off and see if it gets better. It's only going to get easier. I will definitely say that. It's only going to get easier to apply for forgiveness and get forgiveness. They're not going to put more stringent rules around it. It's only going to go the other way. But I know for a lot of people, they'd rather just get it done. So if that's you and you've got your paperwork ready, then you can go ahead and get it done. Let's see. Yes, so go back and watch. I talked about that towards the beginning of this with the guidance that came out around taxability. So yes, that is true. You won't be able to deduct the expenses. Again, that's another thing that could change. Okay, let's see. So do I have any information on if someone received too much in EIDG? So let's say you put in 5 employees and you really had 3, right? If they listed more employees than they had, might be an issue. So this happened to a lot of people because that was the worst application of all time. If you're asking me, they threw that thing up way too fast and didn't actually think about what they were asking people. All they had on there was number of employees with no discussion on what does that mean, right? And a lot of people put contractors into that number when it really was just meant for actual W-2 employees. So a lot of people got more. That might have led to you getting more of an EIDL loan than you, or an EIDL grant than you should have. I have not seen any reckoning of that. I don't really expect it unless there was actual fraud involved. So I don't really expect, they aren't asking people how much should you have gotten. There's no real process for that. So as of right now, it doesn't seem to be an impact. And remember, that was kind of a random rule that was added that wasn't in the CARES Act, the $1,000 per employee. The CARES Act said basically they should be able to get up to $10,000. But it was really Treasury that, because there were so many people, Treasury and the SBA, because there were so many people that were applying, they did this kind of arbitrary $1,000 per employee rule. But they did not explain it very well. So I think as long as you are, did not do it in a fraudulent way, didn't do it as a reason to try to get more EIDL grant money, then you're probably fine. I would maybe document somewhere why you put in the number that you did, right? If you included contractors or something like that. But there was no good kind of explanation there. So that happened to a lot of people. Okay, let's see. All right, so you're filling out PPP forgiveness, and I only have 2 choices, 8 or 24 weeks. I thought we had to cover, could do owner draw payments equal over 10 weeks. Yes. So if you are a sole proprietor, right, you would choose the 24 weeks. You can take that over 10 weeks. Remember, it was only 10 weeks worth of pay. The 24 weeks was just to give people longer to use it if they had employees. That doesn't really apply to sole proprietors because you can pay your whole amount in 10 weeks, right? Because it was 2.5 months worth of pay, which is roughly 10 weeks. Okay. But they gave people 24 weeks to spend it if you had employees, because they really wanted you to continue to pay your employees and use up that money. So the 8 or 24 week is really more towards employers, not so much to people who are just sole proprietors. So it's totally fine if you just paid it over 10 weeks. Doesn't matter. You could have paid it to yourself at one time. The 10 weeks mattered if you were also getting unemployment. So the 10 weeks is basically the amount of pay you were getting through PPP that you would want to not be claiming unemployment, or at least claiming that income on your unemployment over that 10 weeks. But you could pay yourself from PPP rules. If you weren't on unemployment, you could pay yourself one check and it'd be totally fine. So yes, you would pick the 24 though. Sole proprietors, it almost always makes sense to just choose the 24-week time period so that you can use the entire amount to pay yourself. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I got some more questions. Here they come. Do I think they will extend EIDL and PUA, and why would only keep the PPP open for a few months? What are your thoughts on Congress getting $1 million PPP loans before everyone else? I'm not sure what you mean by Congress getting $1 million PPP loans before anyone else. I haven't seen that. So I'm not sure where that is coming in. At the very beginning, when PPP loans were given out, they did have an issue with a lot of the banks that were prioritizing their own customers. And so some of the bigger companies, they would also put them in front as well. So there was the first stage of PPP loans did structure such that bigger companies were giving their PPP loans. However, after that, a lot of pressure was put on that. And a lot of those bigger, especially the Republic companies, gave back the money. And they kind of gave them a line in the sand date to say, okay, if you shouldn't have really gotten it, then you need to give us back the money by X date, and then we won't come after you for fraud. So those are really for the bigger companies that have other access to liquidity. But remember though, PPP loans, they expired. They were around for several months. I mean, they started in April. So it was April, May, June, July, and then ended at the beginning of August. So it was, 4.5 months or so that PPP was open, and it expired with money unused. So, the first tranche was crazy, and then they closed it down and they reopened it. But that second tranche really did not go as fast. So everybody should have had an opportunity to get a PPP loan if they needed to get one. Again, maybe not in that first 2-3 weeks when things were crazy, but after that, it got the banks got a hang of it, and the processes got better. And so people should have been able to get them. As far as extending EIDL and PUA. So PUA does end at the end of the year. PUA being, there's some confusion around what that is. PUA is the extension of unemployment to people who are self-employed. So that was an FPUC was the extra $600 you would get for a while. That has since long been gone. But PUA goes through the end of December, meaning that you could get on unemployment even as a self-employed person who hasn't been paying into unemployment. Will that get extended? I think so. The question is when. Will it happen before the end of the year, or are they going to extend it sometime in late January or something like that? We don't know the answer. So there could be a blockout period where people don't get it. I normally would have thought that they would have it all done, by then, so that we wouldn't have kind of this, this cliff and then multiple weeks before something happens. But with the way that things have been going, I don't necessarily have faith that they are going to pass something before the end of the year, but they may. So hopefully they will. I think that's high on the priority list. They've still even been debating giving people more money for unemployment as well. So we'll have to kind of wait and see how that goes. Okay, let's see. All right, so 2 members, Candy says, 2 members LLC, no employees, under 50,000 PPP and overfunded, using owner pay of K1 leaves 46% for utilities, which is more than allowed 40%. Shall I assume the extra 6% will not be forgiven? Yeah, the way that it calculates out right now, it probably won't be. So you do have to certify that you're not paying more than 2.5 times your 2019 pay to each owner, right? So you figure out what that is, which it sounds like you've already done, and that leaves 46%. It likely, the way that the calculations will work on the forgiveness application is it will leave an amount that is unforgiven because of that. So unless you were to, I don't know if you're still in your time period or not, but probably not, I guess, at this point. But you could go hire someone and spend that extra money on them. So that's also an option, is hiring another person and spending money on payroll to get yourself to the 60%, or just kind of set aside that money, or just know it's going to turn into a loan a loan at 1%. Now, that's the way it should work. So if you're following the letter of the law with that, likely that's how the calculation should come out. Although, that said, I'm curious to see how they work that out, because you said it's under 50,000. So if you had under 50,000, the FTE requirements don't, and the salary reduction doesn't apply to you, but the 2.5 times still would. And I'm imagining the 60% as well. So I think that even under 50,000, you could be in a situation where you won't get that fully forgiven, but most of it should be. Thanks, April. Let me see. Okay. So Sharon asked, is there any additional clarification on the EZ form? Wouldn't everyone technically be able to say they were safe harbor due to social distancing, or not worth the subjective nature of that issue, and should do the long form to ensure forgiveness? So what you're talking about, Sharon, is, for those who don't know, there is a box on the EZ form. If you want to use the EZ form, one of the boxes that can qualify you for that is if you have not reduced average annual salary or hourly wages, and you were shut down during a portion of your covered period, and could not operate at max capacity or at full capacity because of that. But only because you were shut down by kind of government order, or you had social distancing required by OSHA and CDC and all of that. So it has to be something that was actually required by guidelines. So a lot of people wouldn't fall into it if it was just that they didn't have the business, right? Like if their business just went down because of it. So for example, if you are a dog sitter and your business basically tanked overnight because of the fact that nobody was traveling anymore, well, that wasn't necessarily, OSHA social distancing directly. So that one would be harder to be able to check that box. But if you were actually shut down, if you were required to be, if different compliance rules made it such that, you're a restaurant and you can only open at 50% capacity, that would count. So what that does is it allows you to not have to worry about your full-time equivalent employee count. So if you don't have to worry about your full-time equivalent employee count and making sure that you have the same number of employees, then you can use the EZ form. But do go check out, like April said, I do have a video that's linked on that link on the PPP playlist that talks specifically about Safe Harbor and some of the kind of catches there. Now, we don't know how, they don't ask you for proof of that. You have to retain proof of that, but that's not going to be one of the things the bank is likely to ask you for, is proof of being shut down and why. I would make sure you have some documentation though, in case you're ever audited, to show here was why I felt like I could check that box that applied to me. So hopefully that helps. Okay. So Christine says, received less than 50,000 PPP beginning May, all spent on employees. In using the 24 weeks, we may be receiving grant monies from another source for partial payroll for July through September. In using the 24, I'm trying to see what the question is. Got it. Okay. Would we be able to use 24 weeks payroll less the grant monies? We will be. Yeah. So you can, as long as, so you can't like double dip. So if you're using a grant for some of that payroll, right? If it's like a payroll specific grant, and you have to use it for payroll, then that can't be included in what you put in for PPP forgiveness. Okay. So hopefully you have more than enough, like, that the grant paid for some and PPP paid for the other. Just any amount that was related to a grant, you can strip out of that forgiveness application and only put the amounts that you paid with your PPP money. And that should be fine. It kind of goes into that double dipping thing. If you got, even if it was EIDL, if you're using it for the same thing, then that's going to be a problem. But if you use it for, it's both payroll, but, different payroll, not the same person for the same time period, then you should be fine. Okay, so I probably missed a few in here. I'm just going back to see, but that's pretty much the full update that I had. Let's see. I think I got to most of these. Okay, good. Good. Yeah, okay, I got it. All right. how do we make a payment on your SBA loan? Well, I'm assuming you're talking about the EIDL loan. Firstly, you don't have to yet. If you got the EIDL loan, you have 1 year before you have to make a payment. There are some tutorials on how to do that. I can go and look for it. I do want to do a video probably on how to do this, but there is a portal where you can go and make payments on your SBA loan. So hopefully you've received some information that has kind of like your loan number and some of the information about it, but there is a portal to go out there and start making payments if you want to make them. Now, payments are not due for a year on your EIDL loan, but you are accruing interest. So just make sure that you're aware of the fact that you're accruing interest. If you want to pay down a part early so that that portion no longer has interest being accrued on it, then you can do that. But you go, I think it's pay.gov is where you go to be able to do that. Let's see. Let's see. Are you a CPA and or lawyer? I am a CPA, yes. Did you show any clients how they can get both PPP? Yes. Most people out here got PPP and EIDL. I was not one of those that told them that they can only have one. You can have both. You can't use them for the same thing, but you can have both. And that is something that I've been talking about since the beginning of this is even with unemployment, there are ways to be able to get them. It's just a matter of paying attention to the timing and what you're using the funds for to make sure you don't get into that double dipping. But it's 100% not true that you can only get one of those things. You can get PPP and you can get EIDL. And I would say that the vast majority of my audience did get both, or at least was offered both. Let's see. Is interest paid on construction vehicle loans that were written under owner's personal name deductible for PPP forgiveness? No, and actually interest. So what you mean deductible? I mean, I'm assuming you mean forgiven under. No, and actually interest on other loans is an acceptable usage of the money, but it's not forgivable. So that was kind of a weird thing that we thought that the way that it was written for what you could use the funds for said interest on other loans. But then they kind of shifted it and took that off when it came to forgiveness. So no, and the fact that it's personal as well, but no, you can't. The main thing is payroll, rent, utilities. Those are the primary things that you can use it for and be, let's see. Yes. And so for the EIDL loan, they should have mailed you a bill or something to the effect. You should have some information. If not, you can call the SBA and make sure that you can get that because you want to have information about your loan and how to pay it. They are. So another thing is a lot of people are getting emails and calls that got the EIDL loan asking you for more things. So it might be proof of hazard insurance, different things like that. It might be articles of incorporation that they want to get from you. So just FYI, make sure to always check the source because there's a lot of scammers out there. But if it is from SBA.gov and you verified it, then that is a request that a lot of people are seeing, especially for those loans over $25,000. A lot of people are getting additional requests for more information because they kind of shortcut the process when they did this whole EIDL loan thing and asked for basically nothing from people. And so now they're trying to go back and kind of cover themselves and get all the documentation that they need. So if you get a request like that, it is normal. Do make sure that you're checking, though, on any correspondence like any of this, you guys. Make sure you check the source. Make sure you check the emails. Make sure you call the SBA, right? Get the official number and check and make sure that it's real because, you guys, the scams are rampant right now. Don't give people personal information over the phone or on the computer until you have fully verified. And usually no one's going to ask you for personal information over the phone. There should be some kind of secure way to get them information. So anywho, that's my little lecture for the day. Okay, well, I am going to let you guys go and I will see you same time. Well, nope, actually I won't. We're going to be gone for Thanksgiving. So, make sure next Friday, make sure you just go do your Black Friday online. Do all my Black Friday shopping online this year. But you guys enjoy that. I will not be here next week, but I will be back the week after
on Friday at 1:30 Central for more talk of stimulus. And maybe we'll have a little bit of an update by then. Who knows? I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.